South California Ridgecrest earthquakes spark fears of the big one, and Yellowstone supervolcano eruption that would spew ash for thousands of miles. Well, we know that previous earthquake swarms, the one that happened 20 years ago, 7.1 magnitude in Ridgecrest, did cause an earthquake swarm in Yellowstone. The Chile 8.8 magnitude earthquake caused earthquake swarm in Yellowstone, as did the Haiti earthquake and the Alaska Denali earthquake. All of these quakes moved Yellowstone. Not only did the Ridgecrest 20 years ago, 7.1 magnitude, cause quakes at Yellowstone, but this one here also caused the San Andreas southern portion near Los Angeles to creep and move, in other words, as the geologists recently told us. Now, California's earthquake pause was very uncanny from what they were telling us before all this happened in Ridgecrest, and they were wondering why. There was an earthquake drought, and they were warning of the big one being imminent because that was a very unusual earthquake pause. It should have already had several big ones by now, they said, and that pressure was not being released and had to go somewhere. And the geologists are now nervously eyeing 8 nearby volcanoes. And why has Yellowstone supervolcano been acting so strangely? U.S. Geological Survey warned Southern California to expect more big earthquakes to come. 5, 6, 7 magnitude, could be in a couple of weeks, next couple of months, because of the fact that it's been jolted so violently. Some say they may be even more powerful than those experienced in the past few weeks. They said these quakes do not make the big one less likely. This is what local seismologist Dr. Lucy Jones told Los Angeles Times. She said there's about a 1 in 20 chance at this location we'll be having an even bigger earthquake in the next few days, weeks, months, that we have not yet seen the biggest earthquake of the sequence, she said. So she was being very clear that Ridgecrest had nothing to do with releasing the energy of the southern part of the San Andreas Fault, which is expected to hit the Los Angeles area. That is something totally different, and that power has not been released at all. So in part, it's because California is way overdue for the big one, and the past century has been abnormally quiet in terms of large, ground-rupturing, major earthquakes. The last big one was in 1906, when a magnitude 7.9 earthquake realigned the real estate of San Francisco. U.S. geologists beginning to suspect that this is not just a lucky roll of the dice. Something deep under California appears to be changing, and its implications are yet to be understood. There is an ominous silence. So these past week's earthquakes are the most significant experienced by Southern California since 1999. That's when the other 7.1 magnitude event tore through the Mojave Desert, again in Ridgecrest. That's the one that gave the earthquake swarm to Yellowstone a couple of weeks after that. So we could expect something similar to happen at Yellowstone. The pressure may be, and the motion waves may be working themselves up to that area. Now, the co-author of a recent study said, "We're unusually quiet. The current unlikely earthquake hiatus, the biggest faults and the faults carrying most of the slip have not ponied up." This is what Glenn Biasi told Live Science in the spring. This was in April. He was very pensive about what was going on. Something very weird is going on, he wanted to say. Something has broken the geological pattern. So if something breaks their geological formula, I suppose that means that they don't know what's taking place. The USGS has carefully scoured California's terrain because they want evidence of past earthquakes. They know how many lives could be potentially at stake, and they have to be forewarned and forearmed. They've assembled seismic records dating back about 1,000 years at 12 key areas along the Golden State's major fault lines: the San Andreas Fault, which is over 800 miles, the Hayward Fault, the San Jacinto Fault, and we recently now, because of the Ridgecrest area here, see this Garland Fault, the one that you see there horizontal, basically locked into the right to the west on San Andreas, as you can see there. And where that pink area is on the map of the left, that is the area of the Walker Lane Fault system, which has not yet been explained to us by the geologists, and that locks in all the way to the north towards the Cascadia Arc. That's why when we had the 6.2 earthquakes off Vancouver Island, 13 hours later we had the 6.4 all the way down to Ridgecrest, and the next day the 7.1 on July 5th, is because this Walker Lane Fault system is locked into the Garland, the San Andreas, and all the way north it pushes towards the Cascadia Arc. That whole thing is like a bowl, an elongated oval bowl locked up. That's why the Vancouver Island earthquake had the pressure released down at Ridgecrest, as you can see there. That happened again 5 years ago. There was another 6.5 magnitude off the north of Vancouver Island in Canada, and 24 hours later it gave a moderate earthquake exactly at Ridgecrest in the Mojave Desert, which is, by the way, the Coso volcanic field. It's a volcanic field with one of the biggest geothermal plants in the country, supplying power to 270,000 families, and obviously there's a magma chamber down there. Now the USGS scouring for evidence going back to seismic records dating back 1,000 years to 12 sites along the San Andreas, Hayward, and San Jacinto faults, and the data reveals the odds of all three faults being quiet for 100 years is next to none. So this is something very shocking to them. All these faults being quiet for 100 years is next to none. Well, perhaps it's divine providence that there are so many people living in this area. Perhaps God wants to protect them. Now, instead, the USGS study says California should have expected about 6 big ones in that time. Can you imagine? Mr. Biasi said, "We do not think it's happened in the previous 1,000 years that we have studied." So you can see how unusual this is, and that's why they're so worried. Data revealing the odds of all three faults being quiet for 100 years is next to none. They said, "We don't think it's happened in the previous 1,000 years." The quake hiatus is still a mystery for them. Speculation that the faults had merely vented much of their pent-up tensions in an unusual active 1800s remains that. It's just speculation. Another possibility remains, they say, that there is something even deeper, something so big that it is causing the activity of the state's 5 major fault lines to synchronize. The 5 major fault lines of the states to synchronize. So these are something very strange happening. They said the potential for damaging earthquakes, landslides, floods, tsunamis, and wildfires is widely recognized, as we know, in California. Another USGS report reads, "The same cannot be said for volcanic eruptions, even though they occur in the state about as frequently as the largest earthquakes and the San Andreas Fault. One of the state's 8 volcanoes, 7 have been found to sit above active magma chambers. Disturbingly, it finds some 200,000 people are classified at risk because of this. If an eruption was to occur, it argues that there is a 16% chance of such an event. Are you ready? Are you sitting down? Within the next 30 years. So, like the fault line studies, geologists have pulled their clues from California's landscape to determine volcanic activity, what took place 5,000 years, in the past 5,000 years. It's found 5 volcanoes: Mount Shasta, Medicine Lake, Lassen, Long Valley Caldera, which is by the way, supervolcano, and Salton Buttes. These are all in California. They've erupted during the last 3,000 years. All of them have erupted in the past 3,000 years. Some of them in the past 1,000 years. Clear Lake Volcanic Field near San Francisco, which is, by the way, part of the Long Valley Caldera supervolcano system. Clear Lake, while rated as potentially of very high risk, has not blown for longer. The trick is in predicting when the next volcanic eruption is likely. It's an inexact science, but they have clues, they say. GPS sensors, the GPS sensors, the satellite radar, and they are used to measure deformations in the volcano's surfaces. Seismometers detect subterranean movements. Gas emissions are regularly tested for changes in the content. And so far, all 8 remain quiet. Now, what about the core issue? The Earth's molten heart is always on the move. Movements deep beneath the crust, believed to be behind the North Pole's shifting magnetic field, as we know it's going towards Siberia. There's a magnetic anomaly in the South Atlantic that's even giving some satellites headaches. They have to shut down whenever they go through there. The geysers at Yellowstone National Park, which sit above the world's biggest supervolcano, and as we know recently they said there's a hot spot under there, just like there is in Hawaii. They've been acting erratically. We're talking about the Steamboat geyser that has started erupting almost every 3 or 4 days. Now, is there any link to all this? Seismologists say there is simply no evidence to support this, and a surface quake in California will not have any impact on Yellowstone about 1,000 kilometers, about 700 miles away. Well, we just said, from what the USGS has told us, that the 7.1 magnitude in Ridgecrest that took place in 1999, 20 years ago, did cause an earthquake swarm at Yellowstone, just like a lot of other earthquakes did. The 8.8 magnitude in Chile, the Haiti earthquake, and the Alaska earthquake. They all caused Yellowstone to have earthquake swarms. Now, so what do the experts think? Well, USGS unit specifically tasked with monitoring these famous Yellowstone geysers and the Godzilla that lurks underneath the supervolcano of Yellowstone have been baffled by the shifting patterns in the normally regular geyser eruptions. So something is going on there. Something has changed. When it comes to the activity of the enormous magma chamber underneath Yellowstone, even though little has changed, instead changes in a crystal mush within the Yellowstone chamber itself are believed to be distorting the hydrothermal channels feeding the park's geysers, of course. And while Yellowstone supervolcano's last eruption was an earth-shattering event, we're talking about the one that took place 630,000 years ago, the super eruption, it's not due to blow again for several hundreds of thousands of years. Now, this was originally an article on news.com.au, and it's on The Sun, and I'll leave a link below for you for this, with, of course, a lot of our knowledge from what the USGS has given us recently. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.